Welcome to Money 911, where we explore the intersection of health, wealth, and peace of mind. I'm your host, Kris, and today we're venturing beyond the physical realm into the extraordinary world of near-death experience with renowned neurosurgeon and best-selling author, Dr. Eben Alexander. Get ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about consciousness, reality, and the true nature of wealth. This just isn't an episode. It's a journey that can transform your entire perspective on life. All right, Dr. Alexander, it is such an honor and privilege beyond words to have you here and share this great topic with you.
Oh, Kris, thank you so much for having me on today. I look forward to our discussion.
Me too. And I came about finding out about you in an odd way because I've had a family experience when my family member passed away, and I went through a very incredible, amazing experience. But I got hit by a big old grief. And, you know, my husband and my mom and dad had passed before. So it was sort of a compounded all of them together. And it caused me to reach out and seek. And, you know, I believe in everlasting life and I have faith, but it just really made me reach out more. And then I started listening to shows on YouTube. One thing led to another, and then I listened to your story. I must have listened to hours of you as I was on the road speaking and trying to keep my energy up from the way that the world looks about death. So you literally have, I would say, gone beyond the veil of death, and your experience has reshaped your understanding of what true wealth means and the grand tapestry of existence, let alone all of your knowledge as a doctor. So, you know, it's a big conversation, and I just want to jump right in there of your experience.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it's, I think, important to point out who I was before.
Right.
I had my near-death experience in 2008. At the time, 54 years old, I'd honed a very kind of scientific worldview. My adoptive father, that's an important part of my story, was that I was adopted. But my adoptive father had been a tremendous influence in my life. He was a globally renowned neurosurgeon. He was very scientific, but he also had no conflict whatsoever between all of his scientific knowledge and his belief and knowing in the reality. Was all. But like many of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s, like I did, we were trained in a certain way of thinking, especially if we pursued science like neurosurgery, which is what I went into. And that's a form of science known as materialism or physicalism. That is, that only the physical world exists. And therefore, somehow you've got to explain what we call consciousness is being generated by the physical brain. And of course, before my coma, I bought into the conventional materialism hook, line, and sinker. As much as I heard stories from patients and families, as I describe in my book, Proof of Heaven, and nurses, I will credit the nurses with being way ahead of me on this one, but they would try and convince me that there was so much more to the picture. But I just thought, you know, to me, it was a struggle to figure out how conscious awareness could survive the death of the brain and body. And that's why I think I ended up having this experience. I mean, I've learned that near-death experiences are always tailored for the individual who has them, period. That's their only reason for being. Now, when you study them in large numbers, we find these amazing patterns that suggest that it's a very real realm that people are entering, and especially when you start to acknowledge the power of what's known as the life review, which probably happens in between 25 and 50% of near-death experiences. And the life review is often seen by people who have a shared death experience, but it would be the life review of the departing soul and not of the bystander soul. And I think your experiences, some of them have definitely been in that category of shared death, which is fascinating because you get the same kind of ingredients as a near-death experience, but it all occurs in perfectly healthy people. I mean, the typical story is a loved one who might be 1,000 miles away. and a patient is dying. And on the way out, their soul kind of goes through, grabs the soul of the bystander, takes it along, even to witnessing a full-blown life review, and then coming back to this world to tell the story. And I heard many acclaim from my audience members when I started giving talks about my Proof of Heaven experience, which was about 2 years before the book came out. And most of them would share with me near-death experience or after-death communications, but a significant number also had shared death. And I didn't even know what to make of it when they said that they'd gone along with a loved one in their leaving of this world, and that it was the greatest gift they've ever gotten from that loved one, because it proved to them not only the eternity of their souls, but the eternity of their soul connections. And that is a crucial ingredient to help us rise above the bleak and paltry fiction of materialist science, which science has now disproven materialism. I mean, the fact that the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022 was for entanglement in quantum physics. Entanglement is a phenomenon of information connection that completely transcends our notions of space-time and causality in this physical realm. And yet entanglement is the law of the universe. That's been proven through 40 years of experiments. And that's why that Nobel Prize is so absolutely critical, because it basically means the scientific world, as represented by the Nobel Committee, has now left behind the simplistic falsehoods of materialism and is pursuing a much deeper and richer kind of interpretation of the nature of reality. This is something that we talk about in great measure in our third book. There's Proof of Heaven, which has been extremely popular, published in more than 40 languages, was on the New York Times bestseller list, #1 position for nonfiction for 42 weeks, and it was on the list for 2 years. So it clearly struck a chord. And then Living in a Mindful Universe is my attempt, and that's co-written with my wife and co-partner Karen Newell. And Living in a Mindful Universe is really the proof of heaven. From my perspective, the book Proof of Heaven is, this gigantic kind of statement of, wow, these things are real. They can happen to all of us. But how do you explain it? And Living in a Mindful Universe takes quantum physics, neuroscience, and the hard problem of consciousness, the binding problem in philosophy of mind, which is the apparent unity of consciousness in an individual. Very difficult to explain if it's all multiple neuronal populations contributing to this thing we call consciousness, and also all the evidence for non-local consciousness out of the world of parapsychology, like telepathy. People might not believe telepathy is real, but ask an identical twin. 35% of identical twins have had very powerful telepathic experiences, showing us that mental layer of the universe, which we like to think is our own little mind layer, mental layer, but it's shared. And in fact, in the process of dying and leaving the physical body, you find out it's shared so tremendously that something like a life review is more like a reliving of events. Not only that, but it's a reliving from the perspective of all involved. And that's where you start to realize the life review, when it's studied in large numbers in near-death experiences, like in Bruce Grayson's paper reporting on on 700 or so life reviews in his broad database on NDEs, he finds that something like 74% of people describe them as re-experiencing the events from perspective of all involved. It's like we're sharing the dream of the one mind. It's truly the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, written into the very fabric of the universe. And this is something, in my own personal journey, I didn't have an Eben Alexander life review because some of the deepest lessons I was to learn had to do with memory and the very nature of consciousness, and a realization of how expanded my sense of consciousness was during the NDE. And yet the amnesia was very important. And don't worry, most people do not have that very powerful amnesia. But throughout my 7-day near-death experience, due to severe bacterial meningoencephalitis, I had no memories of Eben Alexander's life, no knowledge of Earth, this universe, human beings, etc. Every bit of it was gone. My language was completely gone. And when I first woke up from coma, as my old mind and memory was returning over about a 2-month time, that's what it took for everything to come back. But during that period, I was deeply mystified by this journey. And to me, I made sense of that apparent amnesia by saying, well, I did have a severe case of bacterial meningoencephalitis, and I had not yet really begun to dive into my medical records, which I did do over those 2 and 3 and 4 months post-coma. And as I read more of my medical records, it was shocking to me that I could have such a profound, rich, detailed, memorable spiritual experience at a time when my brain was absolutely incapable of hosting any kind of dream or hallucination. That's one reason why the scientific world takes my case so seriously. In fact, some of my biggest allies in this whole journey of 15 years since that coma have been in the scientific community, people who study consciousness, who realize that these kind of stories are not just imagination and dreams and wishful thinking, but are very profound indicators of the deeper nature of who we are and what this thing we call humanity and human consciousness is all about. And especially after all my memories returned, even more complete than the memories had been before my coma. That's something we discuss in Living in a Mindful Universe. We also discuss in that book how memories are not even stored in the brain. It's one of the last nails in the coffin of materialist neuroscience. But certainly in my medical records, it was clear that there was tremendous damage to my brain. And that's why the medical case report, written by 3 doctors not involved in my care, but fascinated by my recovery, is so important. And that case report was in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, September 2018, by Dr. Serbi Khanna, Lauren Moore, and Bruce Grayson. And in fact, they were challenged by the peer review editors of the journal. How do you explain this unprecedented, miraculous recovery that Alexander had? And they said it's because he had a near-death experience, because they knew of other cases of profound recovery, like Anita Morjani, who wrote the book Dying to Be Me, and her recovery from an advanced stage 4 lymphoma when she should have been dead within hours. But she had a profound spiritual journey in an NDE and ended up curing herself of her cancer. Likewise, Dr. Mary C. Neal, the orthopedic surgeon who wrote the book To Heaven and Back, she had a profound NDE in the context of a kayaking accident in Chile in the late 1990s. She was forced underwater by a waterfall, legs broken and jammed under a boulder. She was brought to the surface 30 plus minutes later, dead, and what was resuscitated ended up having a full recovery. Hers is also a profound story of healing that completely defies our medical expectations. But this is kind of the hallmark of the profound nature of spiritual healing available through near-death experiences. And that's just the beginning, because all of us, as conscious sentient beings, have access to that world of spirit and the united nature of that world, where in fact, we're in this with all of our fellow souls, sharing that dream of the one mind. And that's why in life reviews, what you find is the only important thing is how much love you've been able to bring to your fellow beings. That was, to my knowledge, first stated by an Armenian soldier killed in battle 2,400 years ago, written about in Plato's Republic. And the was his name. He was dead on the battlefield several days. He was a very important general. They ended up putting him on a funeral pyre after the battle was over, and he ended up waking up. And he said, when you die, your life flashes before your eyes, and you find the only important thing is how much love you were able to deliver to your fellow beings. So similar stories occur on battlefields of today and in many situations of people dying and near death. And what we learn is that we are eternal spiritual beings. We have an eternal soul. And this is independent of any kind of religious beliefs you might have. In fact, you don't need religion, even though religion for many can be a beautiful source of true spirituality. But I would advise people, if your religion is in the business of being very exclusive and falsely separative from others and, demeaning others, and in other words, if your religion is not purely involved with unconditional love, kindness, compassion, and mercy for all fellow beings, then your religion has lost its way. It is no longer on the pathway dictated by the original prophets, and you can forget about it. I came to recognize after my journey that beautiful God force at the core of the universe that I discovered in the highest of my ascents, from the earthworm eye view, a very primitive course realm, through a light portal of music into this brilliant ultra real gateway valley, much more real than this world, and then ascending from that into this higher level that I call the core, where I've found that the very source of my conscious awareness was this divine God force at the core of the universe, and that all of us have that ready access to that power. And I came back calling that beautiful force because to me, the word God, I'd grown up in a Methodist church in North Carolina, had conventional religious views, but they didn't really allow for the full bore becoming one with the divine that I witnessed in this core realm. And they also didn't really kind of cover this sense of unconditional love and how important it is, and how that's right at the core of each and every one of our journeys. In fact, when you study not only near-death experiences, but shared death experiences, after-death communications, deathbed visions in people who were dying, like in hospice and terminal care, you find they all show the same things. Life reviews, making amends for where we've harmed others, coming to appreciate the true power and healing and wholeness that comes into our lives by being there for our fellow beings and helping them. That's our ultimate reason for being here, is to help each other, to promote love and kindness, compassion. The more we pour that out to the universe, the more the universe responds by pouring that back on us. So
Right.
there are many directions we can go into discussing all this, but I hope that's kind of an opening that shows you the territory we have, which is
Right.
beautiful and very hopeful for humanity at large.
It is hopeful. I mean, imagine most of our listeners, everybody struggles with the fear of death, financial insecurity, death, unknown. And your NDE really changed your relationship with fear. And some of my experiences did the same thing, where I had a shared near-death experience with a very close loved one. And it just completely removed the fear of death, not
Right.
defiantly, but as an
Just
empowerment. Right?
realize you keep going, and our relationships are the thing that's so important.
Exactly.
That's why life reviews are critical. It's also important to point out that in this big discussion of life reviews that Bruce Grayson offers in the Journal of Near-Death Studies in the autumn of 2021, he makes it clear how it really is a reliving of events. In fact, I saw an account not long ago where a man who had drowned said that he could count the mosquitoes in the air during the event of his drowning. And that's how detailed and powerful the reality of revisiting it in the near-death experience life review was. So these are not just vague sepia-tinted memories of events of your life. They're powerful reliving of event. And about a third of his cases of life reviews actually said their entire life was revisited in this life review. So you just need to put away the notion that these are vague memories or dreams or imagination, and start acknowledging that the universe is a far grander place than we appreciate from our kind of lowly materialist position. But by possessing consciousness and awareness, and that consciousness is actually connected with the mind of the universe. And that's where centering prayer and meditation can be so important. Especially to take a break from the insanity of our modern headlines and polarization in this world. But really, meditation has been essential for me. The last 11, 12 years, I've meditated an hour or two a day. For people who need a powerful technique, if you don't already have one, I would recommend sacredacoustics.com. Full disclosure, that is a company that was co-founded by my wife and life partner, Karen Newell. She's also the co-author of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, which really goes the distance to connecting quantum physics, neuroscience, philosophy of mind, parapsychology, non-local consciousness, and putting it into one coherent package about the brain as a filter and this primordial mind that we are all sharing. But the world is wide open, and that kind of meditation, there's some free downloads there at sacredacoustics.com. Most importantly, I'll point out there was a pilot study by Dr. Anna Yusum in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases, peer-reviewed, that supports a tremendous role for sacred acoustics in alleviating anxiety. Now, this was a study that was published in February of 2020. Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases, Dr. Anna Yusum, and she found a 26% reduction over 2 weeks of listening to sacred acoustics in anxiety symptoms. That's compared to only a 7% reduction over 2 weeks with standard talk therapy for anxiety in her patients. So just listening to these differential frequency brainwave entrainment tones of sacred acoustics had that very powerful effect. And for your audience, I will point out that the Whole Mind Bundle on sacredacoustics.com was used for that study. And when Karen realized how important it was at alleviating anxiety, she dropped the price. Note that this was right at the beginning of the pandemic, February 2020. She dropped the price to $19. And not only that, but she knew a lot of people were going to be in economic hardship because of the pandemic. So she also put a free option on sacredacoustics.com for the Whole Mind Bundle so that people could download it for free if they had no financial means during the pandemic. And that beautiful gift of the heart from Karen to the world is still in place. So we expect people who have financial means to pay for it. But, for people who are really stressed in our modern era with anxiety, fear of death, fear of where the world is headed, to have a powerful meditation tool in your pocket is very useful. And I've learned to just ride the tones of sacred acoustics. And if you try them out, you'll see what I mean. It can be very powerful. It's not for everybody, but for many, many people, it's a tremendous asset.
Right. Well, you've experienced reality beyond the physical world, which is where everybody's at. And I've listened to a lot of your, talking and your story. And can you just share a little bit of what actually happened to you?
I will do that. And I'll give you a brief version so we can then pursue any avenues you'd like around it. But it all started, remember, amnesia, complete non-awareness, non-information about everything in my life to that point. It was an empty slate. And in looking back on it, that was an important ingredient for me to really get some of the deepest lessons. And it started in what I call the earthworm's eye view, very primitive course on responsive realm that seemed to go for a very long time, but luckily did not last forever, because then I became aware of this slowly spinning white light. It had the appearance of ground glass, fine silvery and golden tendrils all around it, and it was slowly spinning to me. And as it did so, I recognized it had a beautiful musical melody. And that melody was very important because I used it later when I would go to all these higher spiritual levels, but then tumble back down to that earthworm eye view. By remembering the musical notes of the melody, I was able to conjure up that light portal. And it led up into this brilliant ultra-real gateway valley. The mistake so many people make is they think an NDE would be murky and dreamlike. No, this world, this material world, is murky and dreamlike. That world is sharp, crisp, alive, vibrant, detailed, meaningful, powerful, transformational in every sense of the word. It's also completely outside of our normal concept of space and time. So, for example, these life reviews are not just kind of lived in a stepwise fashion, but in this grand kind of panoramic vision. You have what is often called the spatialization of time, where birth, death, everything in between is simultaneously presented to you. And you witness the interconnections of it all in ways that were never, ever apparent when you were living it down here, living in the weeds, plodding through our life as material beings, but in a much grander sense. And so in this Gateway Valley, for one thing, it was a world of perfection, like Plato's world of ideals. There were thousands of beings dancing down in this lovely meadow. The meadow was surrounded by this rich green forest. There were sparkling waterfalls and the crystal blue pools, tremendous beauty and joy and mirth. There was no sign of any death or decay anywhere. Even the plant life, buds on trees, blossoms, flowers, this very dynamic, rich opening in a garden that got bigger and grander and more powerful by every instant of time. Just this incredible demonstration of beauty in its ultimate form. A world of ideals in so many ways. And I was witnessing all of this as a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing. At no point during the 7-day coma journey did I have any body awareness at all, zero. But I was aware of what was going on around me. And so I was kind of recording all of that. And beside me on the butterfly wing was a beautiful young woman. I'll never forget her sparkling blue eyes, high forehead, high cheekbone, broad smile, soft brown hair framing her lovely face. And she looked at me with a look of pure love. And she, I found later, was a spiritual guide, a guardian angel for my journey. And her message to me was delivered telepathically. She never had to say a word, but that message was very deep, powerful, personal, and connecting. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You're richly cared for. And the other part, which I wish I'd explained a little better in Proof of Heaven at that point in the story, is you can do no wrong. Some people take that completely the wrong way. They think, oh, so we have free license to do anything? No. The life review and all of its deep lessons over thousands of years of reports across all cultures make it crystal clear that the life review is most easily favorable if we've been loving and kind and compassionate and merciful to all of our fellow beings our entire life. Every time we've diverged away from that, been selfish, greedy, handed out pain and suffering to others, we're asking for trouble in the life review, because in the life review, we'll be on the receiving end of those thoughts and behaviors. And if you've been handing out a lot of pain and suffering to others, I don't think being on the receiving end of that is very good. So ultimately, these life reviews are nudging all of us towards oneness and love and compassion, kindness, taking care of each other. Kind of an opposite lesson to what you sometimes see in our modern media and the way people live in the world today. But that's because of the false sense of separation that comes from materialism. I mean, the hallmark of kind of reductive materialism is break everything down to its tiniest parts, explain how those parts interact, and then you understand the world. Well, that completely misses the fact that what we're perceiving is not some naked world of kind of physical reality. And quantum physics tells us that very clearly, that we're experiencing a heavily coded world, coded through our nervous system that in fact does not exist as an independent physical world. That's why quantum physics is so kind of shocking and demanding to so many scientists, is because ultimately it's demanding that we admit the primacy of consciousness, and that this material mechanistic world is something that emerges from the mental and not the other way around. So we've had it backwards all these years. Anyway, I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
Oh, that's all right. That's good.
But what happens is in that beautiful Gateway Valley with that guardian angel giving me that lovely message, the next thing I knew was the angelic choirs above that were emanating chants, anthems, hymns that would thunder through my awareness. The awe and majesty of this incredible spiritual realm, just filled and bubbling with this incredible richness of love and compassion and kindness, and all emanating from that God force at the core of it all. Well, that's where I ascended to yet another level. Those angelic choirs provided yet another portal. I remember seeing all of space and time collapsing down over the material world, all of this rich spiritual realm with its completely different temporal ordering that I call deep time or meta time, that enables life reviews, birth, death, previous lives, even future lives. All of that, a very rich discussion about, how much is predetermined versus how much is decided by free will. I think there's a tremendous amount of free will importance in our existence. It's choices we make and how we live our lives. But in many ways, I would say some of the hardships and difficulties are kind of pre-planned. I do believe that our higher souls and soul groups coordinate kind of what are going to be the lessons that will help our growth the most towards that oneness with the divine. And that's what we end up dealing with in our life. So when I look back on my life, for an example, my adoption abandonment wound was very important. And I was put up for adoption by my mother, who was 16 years old, unwed, in 1953, at age 11 days. But I was taken by social services, and she wasn't really ready to let me go, but they weren't ready to give me back to her. So I was stuck in a baby dorm for 4 months. And that's not an ideal way to start this life. Now, I look back on it now as a gift, because I went through my life. I had the challenges of that adoption abandonment wound. I kind of rose to the expectations and love of my adoptive family, went into neurosurgery, which is what my adoptive father had been in, and then had this incredible life through all of that. And then, of course, this coma journey. But the coma journey was a gift in itself. There are many other gifts that I talk about, especially in Living in a Mindful Universe, that don't seem like gifts when they happen. For example, giving up alcohol in 1991, early in my training. I never had any trouble with alcohol at work, but I knew that on my nights off call, I leaned a little too heavily on that scotch. When I look back on it all now, I see the adoption abandonment wound and also the having to give up alcohol was a tremendous gift, but it was going through those tough times that was the gift. If I hadn't had the toughness, I wouldn't have grown with the lessons that they offered. That's what's so important for people in our modern world to get, is that the hardships and difficulties in so many ways can be gifts that allow us to grow into the souls we came here to be. Now, it turns out as I ascended through the light portals of those angelic choirs and saw all of that spiritual realm collapsing down, I entered what I call the core. The core was a complete unification of all dualities in our world. You know, in our world, we have masculine, feminine, we have good, evil, light, dark, all the different kind of polarities of things that exist in our lives. And all of that is completely resolved into oneness, in a state of pure blistasy in that core realm. And the core realm was where I recognized that oneness with the divine, that in fact, that God force was the very core of my own conscious awareness, as it is for all of us. We all are never separated from that God force of pure love. It's always right there at the core of our consciousness. But this is where meditation, centering prayer can be so important.
Exactly.
Now, every time I entered the core, I was told, you're not here to stay. You'll be going back. We'll teach you many things. And there are many lessons. I've talked about them in the hundreds and hundreds of interviews I've given, et cetera. There's plenty there to talk about, but Living in a Mindful Universe, the book, is a real nice, compact summary of a lot of this kind of information. So highly recommend that. It turns out that there did come a time when I could no longer conjure up the musical melody to take me out of that earthworm eye view into the Gateway Valley. To say I was sad at that point would be an understatement, but I also knew by then that I could trust that I would be taken care of. And that's one of the most beautiful gifts when you study near-death experiences. You learn that you can trust this universe. This God force is there to help you. You have a guardian angel, if not multiple angels, that are there to help you.
Yeah.
Those who've read the book Proof of Heaven will realize it was 4 months after my coma, when I came back to this world, that I saw the picture of my of a relative that I didn't know about because of my adoption history, et cetera. I'm not going to get into any more detail on that, but it's a kind of I think that's one of the things about the book Proof of Heaven that so many people find, oh my God, kind of appealing, is that revelation at the end about that guardian angel when I finally discovered who she was. But all of it is an incredibly rich package that to me, as a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, showed very clearly the reality of our eternal soul and our soul connectedness. And it's a very helpful lesson, especially with the tremendous fear of death in our culture. And I would very quickly short circuit to a piece of information for your viewers. There's no longer a debate as to whether or not the afterlife has been demonstrated in scientific fashion. If you go to bigelowinstitute.org, you will find 29 essays that were written 3 years ago in a contest. This contest demanded at least 5 years of rigorous experience as a scientific researcher in the afterlife question. In that setting, they got 204 essays. They were going to give out 3 monetary awards. Instead, they gave out 29 monetary awards because the essays were so good. They're from all over the world, and they're available for free to the reading public right now. If you start with Jeffrey Mishlaw's first place essay, you will realize very quickly that it's established beyond any reasonable doubt the afterlife and reincarnation are parts of human existence. Some people recoil at the reincarnation, but I'll tell you, that's some of the strongest evidence going for eternity and soul and the scientific proof of the fundamental nature of consciousness, and that this material world is only emergent from that world of conscious awareness. Yeah. So bigelowinstitute.org is a very powerful resource for anyone. There are also some deeply scientific essays in that group of essays. Bernardo Kastrup, Dean Radin, Pim Van Lommel. There are many others. I don't want to disclude anyone because a lot of these People have been writing about this for decades, and they're very established, globally recognized authorities. Just start reading those essays, and you'll realize we're already tremendously along the scientific pathway, approving the reality of this kind of God force at the core of the universe. It's very refreshing and liberating for all of us, for our culture, and for the individuals pursuing deeper knowledge about their role in the universe.
It is refreshing and encouraging, and a lot of people right now are really feeling disconnected from their life purpose. And based on your experience, how can people align their careers, financial goals with their soul's deeper mission? And that they always have this conflict, but really, you have an assignment, and God brought you here, right?
That's absolutely right. And I would point out that one of the deepest and most profound lessons of near-death experiences across all cultures, continents, and millennia is love, is compassion, mercy, care for others, the higher good, taking care of the least, the last, and the lost. For example, there are many refugees in our modern world from warfare and violent authoritarian regimes. It is time to help those people. We should be here helping all of our fellow beings. And that ultimately is kind of the ingredient that leads to a much more fulfilling lifestyle. And you start to realize it's not just about who accumulates the most wealth before they die, but actually who has generated more love, compassion, kindness, and love for fellow beings in this troubled world of ours. And it is high time we shifted away from that paltry fiction of materialism that I mentioned a little while ago, the false belief that our existence is birth to death and nothing more, that consciousness is just the result of chemical reactions and electron fluxes in the brain. We now realize in a scientific perspective that the brain is a filter. It's called filter theory. It's also been labeled as a reducing valve or a transceiver. This is not a new idea. It was very popular in the late 1800s. Dr. William James, head of psychology at Harvard, was a big proponent of filter theory. Aldous Huxley, who wrote Doors of Perception, that was based on a mescaline experience, a very powerful exposition supporting the reality of the one mind and of the brain as a filter. Likewise, I would say F.C.S. Schiller and Henri Bergson in France, these were all proponents of filter theory. And now that also Frederick W.H. Meyer, very important researcher in this world. He passed in 1903, the same year, a posthumous publication of his that is still a remarkable work of kind of spiritual reality, scientifically studied. And all of this is being resurrected in modern academic circles. For example, the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies. If you go to uvadops.org, you can find all their research, academic, scientific papers, etc. The 3 books that Ed Kelly, who's the head of their parapsychological arm, has written, I can highly recommend as some of the best and most profound scientific works on this question, resolving forever the reality of primacy of mind, of consciousness, of soul. His first book, Irreducible Mind, this is from Ed Kelly in 2008. He edited this, but a bunch of brilliant contributors. Then 2015, his book Beyond Physicalism. And finally, in March of 2021, out came Consciousness Unbound. And these are all very powerful, revolutionary works for the scientific community. Their work at UVA on reincarnation is some of the strongest and most powerful evidence going. More than 2,500 cases of past life memories in children they've studied over the last 6 decades. And of those 2,500 cases, 1,700 they have solved. That is, they actually found the person who lived before. Now, of course, most of us say, well, wait a minute, I don't remember past lives. It can't be real. Well, guess what? As Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson, the MDs who are most involved in that research, will tell you, you have to harvest these memories before age 6 or 7, because after that, they're covered over by natural processes. And even the children who've been heavily written about, who had these profound past life memories as a toddler and as a young child, they don't remember them as a teenager. It's gone now because of programmed forgetting. We're not meant to remember all of our higher soul knowledge between lives, at least at this stage in human evolution and development. of our notions of consciousness and our cultural conceptions. We're meant to still be having this bit of a struggle to get there. But I think that the world is going through a paradigm shift. Religions have had 5,000 plus years to teach us the golden rule to treat others as we like to be treated. And in fact, it's now science, the science of consciousness, informed by quantum physics, neuroscience, philosophy of mind, non-local consciousness in parapsychology, et cetera, to take a leap to the next level, which acknowledges this primacy of consciousness and the fact that we're connected through that binding force of love with all of our fellow beings. And this knowledge, as it becomes more and more profound in this world, will change this world for the better. Yeah. Warfare will become a thing of the past, and mankind will be freed from the shackles of this debilitating fear of death that is not warranted. It's a false assumption by the materialist scientific community that is now disproven, and the world can move beyond that. And you don't have to wait for all the world to catch up. You can start doing this yourself through meditation, centering prayer, a practice of going within, and then bringing those lessons to this world at large, learning to love each other, study that NDE literature, study this phenomenon of shared death experiences we've talked about, start meditating and, spending a significant fraction of every day in a deep meditative state. Once you start to explore consciousness, you start to realize it's far more than this little epiphenomenon of a 3.5-pound gelatinous mass floating in a warm, dark bath between your ears. Consciousness is the mind of the universe, and that's something we all share.
Yes,
and
yes.
In fact, putting the little ego mind, that little voice in your head, I love how Michael Singer calls the voice in the head the annoying roommate. That is not your consciousness. Your consciousness is much richer than that. That's your little ego mind.
That's
but
right.
You can identify with a part of self that is much more connected to that primordial God force of the universe. Exactly. And that is something that going within and meditation, centering prayer, can deliver all of us to a much richer and more productive life as an eternal soul, living a meaningful life, helping the highest good.
Dr. Alexander, you just are like a waterfall of
I hope it's not overwhelming. I'm trying to make it appealing to people and understandable to people.
You're giving them all the resources and where to go. And I haven't even, I've got like 20 questions. I've only done 2. So I'm going to have you back if you
Good.
want.
I'd love to talk with you again. That'd be great.
One thing that you've mentioned, because I really like this as a series, it's breaking down the illusion of what people think life and death and love is and God on earth and all of that. But just, kind of like a wrap up here, you mentioned that our consciousness creates reality. So how can we harness this to have an abundant life and to be loving and caring to others and not so self-absorbed in who we are, our little ego chatter that's going on?
I think the best way is to start doing it and, take 20 minutes out each day. And again, if you need a powerful tool, I would recommend sacredacoustics.com. You'll find a tremendous set of resources available there in the form of audio files that will generate profound kind of signals down in the lower brainstem that help your conscious awareness to liberate from the false sense of here, now, and sense of self in the physical body. So to start, just making time each day for exploring mind and exploring these kind of concepts, going within, but then also become more familiar with like the near-death experience literature, some of these writings. You can go to ebenalexander.com to learn a lot more. There's a recommended reading list there that has hot links to many of the scientific papers involved. It's a categorized reading list, so you can go right to what you're interested in now. And also there's an FAQ page I highly recommend, especially for anybody who's looking at kind of the public version of my story, which has been corrupted by one writer in particular who tried to damage my credibility and damage my reputation. And he's been mimicked in certain places. But all of that has been put down by other reports by scientists who have investigated my story, especially that case report I talked about a little while ago. But ebenalexander.com. Also, do not miss the 33-day journey into the heart of consciousness. Right there at the welcome page for Eben Alexander, put in your first name and email address. you'll be in for a 33-day email drip campaign where each day you'll get an email with a new topic from our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Turns out the 33-day journey is completely free. It's a workbook. It's been participated in by over 12,000 people around the world. They leave their comments and help each other all right there on that 33-day journey website. So if you want to get started right now and not spend a penny, get onto that 33-day journey and get going. Also, I would recommend sacredacoustics.com. That's a very important website for the meditation prospects. Also, innersanctumcenter.com, INNER sanctumcenter.com. That was through the brilliance of Karen. And it has several resources on it. One is a mental health practitioner course we did with Dr. Anna Yusum, who I mentioned a little while ago. And Karen and I did this course with Dr. Yusum. And it's there. It does have a cost. It's for professionals. But there's also, for free at innersanctumcenter.com, more than 50 interviews we did with thought leaders on consciousness and other experiencers around the world during the pandemic. Over 50 interviews that are right there for free, all listed on innersanctumcenter.com. Likewise, there's a monthly webinar we do with some of our fans. All of that at innersanctumcenter.com. I highly recommend it. And that's just a starting point to really get going in this journey of self-discovery and freedom from the illusions and the toxicity of that materialist false sense of separation.
Please. Yes. Thank you. Fabulous. Well, I'm going to get into all that myself too. And
Excellent.
Again, I want to thank you so much for being here. That it is a lot of beautiful, beautiful information that someone just takes the time. Well, this will be transcribed so you can get these links and follow it through and break the illusion and get into some reality of what's really going on is love. And that's really schoolroom earth. That's it. That's it right there. What else?
It's all about love. Dionne Warwick and the Beatles sang about it, and they were right on the money.
That's right. Right on the money. The real money. Love.
The real money. You got that right.
All right.
The higher good. That's what we're all here for. And to help each other.
Amen. Healthy money, happy life, right? The energy
Absolutely.
of love.
Well, thanks, Kris, for having me on. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you. As we emerge from this mind-expanding journey with Dr. Eben Alexander, I invite you to pause and reflect on the true nature of wealth. We've ventured beyond the confines of our physical reality and glimpsed a universe infinitely richer than we ever imagined. Remember, your consciousness is the ultimate currency. Invest in it wisely. Until next time, this is Kris Miller, reminding you that the greatest wealth lies not in your bank account, but in the infinite potential of your consciousness. Keep exploring, keep growing, and keep expanding your definition of what's possible. Your journey to true abundance starts now. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithkrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.
Lives inside of